Hi, welcome to Finovate TV, live from FinovateFall 2017. My name's David Penn. I'm a research analyst with the Finovate Group. And joining me today is Dave Birch. He's a co-founder and global ambassador for Consult Hyperion and a major fintech thought leader. He's the author of a number of books, including one I just downloaded to my Kindle last week, Identity is the New Money, as well as a new book, just out I believe, called Before Babylon, Beyond Bitcoin. Thank you very much for joining us.
No, not at all, and thank you for the very flattering introduction.
Oh, excellent, certainly. I want to just ask you, as a long-time Finovate attendee, what is it that brings you back to Finovate year after year?
Well, I mean, it's two things really, because for our clients, you want to keep an ear to the ground and see what the new stuff coming along is. And the honest truth is, it's very time consuming to go out and see all these companies.
Indeed.
So like a lot of other people, you come to Finovate just to sort of see what the landscape looks like.
Certainly.
Really for clients more than for myself.
Oh.
But you know, over the years it's become one of the networking events, and I mean, I don't mean this disrespectfully to the speakers, of course, but I think a lot of people come because it's just a good place to get together a couple of times a year, meet everybody and catch up on things. So it has more of a networking component now as well, I think.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Speaking of that, has there been anything that you've seen at the show this week that's particularly caught your eye?
Actually, it's the genres that I was talking to other people about this morning. I don't know why I thought this, but this year I thought I would see a lot more sort of security.
Oh.
I mean, a lot of the fun things I'm looking at for clients at the moment are about applying the new technologies, you know, machine learning and biometrics, things like this, to fraud detection, security, authentication. And those seem to be hot topics outside the sector at the moment. I mean, we couldn't have seen the Equifax thing blowing up last week, but I'd expected to see identity management, authentication, fraud management bigger. So I was a little disappointed not to see more in that space. I think a lot of the PFM stuff that we, to be completely honest with, got a little bit bored with last year, in the European context, has been reinvigorated because of the regulatory pressure to force the banks to open up their interfaces so that the fintechs can have access to bank accounts and data. And of course we don't quite see that same thing in the US yet, but there was a lot of talk about the APIs, open banking, platformification, that kind of thing. So interesting spread.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thinking about more about the trends, are there some trends that perhaps are maybe a little less talked about that you think are really worth keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to phrase it in that. I mean, there are some trends that everybody, you know, there's things like voice commerce, blockchain, and I mean, these are the things that everyone sees. So, you know, what's underneath? I just can't help feeling that the artificial intelligence, machine learning, the big data, like there's really a lot bubbling under the surface in that space. And right now, and in fact I'm going to mention this as part of my keynote in the banking session, right now we're imagining those technologies in slightly trivial areas, you know, chatbots for customers. I mean, chatbots are a big thing as well, right?
Indeed.
So chatbots, and yet you have to feel like under the hood there are some big changes coming, because that technology is so game changing compared to everything else. So next year I would expect to see a lot more in that space.
That's an excellent point. You think of perhaps the distance between what we're seeing now and some of the conversations more broadly about artificial intelligence, and you wonder, as that gap starts to close, as you mentioned, some of these more sophisticated applications come to fore.
You know, when people stand up on stage right now, and I know how hard it is to do that, and I know how hard they work to do those kind of things, and I'm always impressed with, but you're talking about people talking to banks, people using their mobile phones, people using their web. But in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, the financial sector isn't going to be selling to me, it's going to be selling to my AI. It's going to be the bank AI negotiating with my AI. And that sounds like a crazy thing to say, but it really isn't, because your smartphone, which has been the focus of the show for the last 5 years, is turning into this portal into, you know, these AI systems which are kind of unimaginably complex. So I think the nature of it is really going to change a lot over the next couple of years. And even to the, I mean, dare I say, older visitors, such as myself, when you look at how much has changed over the last few years, actually it's not a lot, right? So we use smartphones, and we use some of the PFMs and basically to access the same products that we had before, but we're just doing it on our phones. So the changes that we've seen over the last few years, I don't think they're going to be anything like the changes we're going to see over the next couple of years, which I think are going to be much bigger. So my prediction, for what it's worth, is that the kind of stuff we'll see pitched next year and the year after is going to start looking fairly radically different from the pitches that we've become accustomed to.
Yeah, that makes a great deal of sense. I suppose on the continuum of the AI, from the folks who are terrified and the folks who wish it was here yesterday, how do you find close to yourself?
Well, that's a difficult question, because we always think of AI in terms of Terminators and giant killer robots and things like that. The truth is, out of the billions and billions and billions of robots that are going to be built in the world, very few of them are going to look like the Terminator. Most of them are going to be just little boxes stuck inside everything that's going to transform. But the flow of data that comes from those things and the decisions around that data will transform the financial services infrastructure. We already see, talking about Internet of Things and stuff like that, we already see moving from an environment where it's not people paying people, it's things paying things. But the decisions around that, who knows what the AIs are going to make of that. And that, I'm not sure if Finovate is really the place to debate, such complex and intricate ethical issues. But you already see this in other sectors. Healthcare is a good example, where one of the issues that doctors have with the AI support systems in healthcare is if the system says you should give the guy this drug or that drug, the doctor doesn't know why that decision was made. And trying to understand why, and you can see a similar kind of thing. If I'm going to give you some money or I'm not going to give you some money, I'm going to let you open an account, I'm not going to let you open an account, I'm going to let you have a card, I'm not going to let you have a card. What are those decisions going to be based on? Who's going to police that and control it? So I think you're right to bring up those issues, because I think they are serious issues that need discussion. I'm not sure Finovate will be the place where they get discussed, but I do appreciate you raising the issues.
Sure. Well, one issue that's definitely going to be discussed, and certainly with the discussion you've got, is with regard to identity, which has been a major focus for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's gone up the agenda over the last few years. So it's probably seemed a little more speculative when we started talking about it originally. But for a variety of reasons, regulatory, because of data protection regulations, there's the business stuff around breach notifications and fines and all this kind of thing, and there's just the reputational damage of, I hate to mention Equifax again, but that is the current example.
Indeed.
Personal data is turning into a kind of toxic waste that nobody wants to handle. And so in cards and payments, we've already taken the first steps towards tokenization systems, like for Apple Pay in your iPhone, right? So it's not your real credit card that's in there, it's like a token that the bank knows links to you, but nobody else does. We need more general solutions like that in the identity space. And these used to be sort of interesting intellectual conversations, but for banks, it's become rather a key issue. And the reason for that is, we were just talking about things like machine learning, artificial intelligence. Those are voracious consumers of data. They need massive quantities of data to work properly. The nightmare vision of the future from these guys' point of view is, you're in Facebook, you think you want to maybe get a new mortgage or look at a new credit card, you'll never come out of Facebook. Because Facebook know who you are, they know what you're doing, they know what you're looking for, and the banks will have to become just suppliers to the Facebook financial services auction. If you lose control of identity, it isn't just an intellectual thing, it changes the nature of the business models that sit underneath it. Now, for some banks, maybe becoming an efficient pipe that sits behind these platforms is a good strategy. That might well be true. I don't know. I think other banks might want to consider becoming the platforms themselves. So if you look at what's happening around the world now in that space, you see these really interesting developments in the last 12 months. You see the Canadian banks forming their consortium to manage identity for consumers. In Belgium, you see the banks and the telcos finally getting together to launch an identity management product. In the US, you see, well, nothing really. Nobody. They use social security numbers as, no one cares about security here. If they did, they wouldn't still use signature cards.
Yeah.
But you do, and in India, and you see these huge changes.
Yes.
So identity has gone up the agenda, you're absolutely correct. But it's partly because of the nature of the shifting competition. You know, when it was banks competing with other banks, competing with the telcos, competing with the brands, but now all of a sudden it's Apple, Google, Amazon, and if they take control of the consumer identity, then that's problematic from a bank point of view. I sometimes tease the boards of banks, but like, what's your vision for the future in 5 years' time? Like, what should the future be? Should it be you go and create a Twitter account using your bank identity, which is safe, secure, KYC'd, regulated institution, you have recourse if things go wrong, you know, there's way that, or is the future you create a bank account using your Twitter account? Because it's like, that's what we're going towards if we don't, I don't want to sound too apocalyptic, but you're right, identity's gone up the agenda, and for banks it's become a business issue now.
Fascinating, tremendous food for thought. I want to thank you very much for sitting down and talking with us, giving us quite a bit to think about.
Not at all, thanks for listening, I really appreciate it.
You bet. Great. Thank you. For Finovate TV, I'm David Penn with Dave Birch. We'll talk to you again.